So our first speaker actually is not here yet, but as a quick reminder for everyone that's on Zoom, please make sure your Zoom name matches your real name for attendance purposes. So our first speaker isn't here yet, but we are joined by Councilwoman Shahana Hanif, who so if you want to come up first? Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Great to see you post brunch. Karen, you did amazing, and just want to give a big round of applause to the club and all the honorees. Okay, so I'm going to share a few legislative updates and what I've been up to. Thank you. I've got two bills getting heard in their respective committees next week. These may be of interest to the club. The first is Intro 206, which would require correction officers to carry and administer Narcan while on duty and to receive related training. That's at the end of the month. And then Intro 215, which would create an Office of Translation and Interpretation within the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. The needs for language access services has increased over the last 2 years. The contract that the city uses, LanguageLine, has expired, and the previous service that our city agencies used has also expired, and we really need some reforms. And having a specific department within the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs could be a way that we address this issue. And having something more systematized, bringing in folks who speak the languages, having opportunities through an economic development pipeline could also be how we address the language access issues. On mandatory composting, as you know, I led and passed this legislation last June. It's going to expand to the Bronx, Staten Island, and Manhattan on October 6th. That covers the rest of the boroughs, making composting as easy as taking out the trash and recycling in all 5 boroughs. I wanted to mention, because I know the club has interests in ensuring that our asylum seekers are safe and welcomed with dignity. As you know, the mayor has pushed through a policy of a 30 and a 60-day shelter cap. So single adults can be in a shelter for up to 30 days, and then they're given a notice to go back to their original site to get placed in a new shelter. Families with children could stay in a shelter for up to 60 days. This has been cruel, it's counterproductive, and particularly for the students who are starting school, let's say in Park Slope, and they're getting evicted and moved to a shelter site in Jamaica. It doesn't make sense for the continued hostility and disruption. And so I have a piece of legislation that would repeal these kinds of caps, no matter who enforces them, whether it's the Department of Homeless Services or other city agencies administering services to house asylum seekers or anybody else who's unhoused. And we're really trying to push through especially the removal of the 60-day cap because of the serious interruptions it's causing for students, primarily in primary school. I've got a few letters underway. Have been hearing a lot about the concrete recycling facility in the Columbia waterfront. We're leading an effort with Senator Gennardis and Assemblymember Joanne Simon to really push the Department of Transportation for just transparency on traffic mitigation, on how they're addressing the dust concerns, particularly on weekends. And as the weather gets colder, because the dust is flowing, do they have a dust mitigation plan? And just overall noise from the construction that's taking place. This facility is supposed to be a temporary 2-year location for them. And a final push is to really just get them to go somewhere else, because it has been a huge disturbance to the residents by the Columbia waterfront. If you're following my newsletters, I talk a lot about daylighting and have been working very closely with our commissioner, Brooklyn Borough Commissioner Keith Bray, in really prioritizing what I've been hearing from our constituents. And the four intersections that have already been daylighted include Atlantic Avenue on Court Street, Carroll Street, on Denton Place, Hicks Street, on West 9th Street, the West Drive, on Prospect Park West. I'm gathering more suggestions. We really want to make our streets safer for pedestrians, cyclists. As you know, so many of the corridors stretching from Kensington Borough Park to Cobble Hill, Columbia Waterfront, have resulted in deadly crashes, which either can kill a resident or leave workers unable to get back to work. So offering you all to send any suggestions that you have that of intersections that would benefit from this intervention. Smoke shops are another hot topic that my office hears a lot about. We've been working with the sheriff's office joint compliance task force to shut down illegal shops, and for that also taking suggestions. We've done a real incredible job shutting down, I would say, over a dozen illegal smoke shops in our communities. So thank you to all of you. If you've reached out to us or have filed separately through 311, it really matters that we hear from you about these illegal shops, because there is no accountability or transparency at the moment. And then finally, a letter to the four precincts that I represent: 66, 72nd, 78th, 76th, requesting special attention as the Jewish holidays come up, and want to make sure that the precincts and local law enforcement are responsive. I've heard from congregation leaders that last year they struggled to have police presence or patrol in their house of worship. And I'll certainly be following along with my other colleagues, because this will be a joint effort. There's a new sanitation containerization law that you all may be aware of. It might be helpful if the sanitation department came to the club to share this update. The sanitation department is implementing mandatory containerization starting November 12th. They're allowing folks to use their own bin that can be closed. However, at some point down the line, the city is mandating that you buy their bin. Right now, you can go to bins.nyc and buy a bin that they say is affordable and could hold up to 55 gallons of trash. So you don't have to do that right now, but at some point the city is administering a you got to do it policy. I'll just wrap up with some events that we're hosting. The Brooklyn Marine Terminal's community engagement workshops are starting at the end of this month, September 28th, particularly residents along the Columbia waterfront. I encourage you to join. This is going to be a monumental change coming to our community. We've got the Housing and Preservation Development in our district returning on October 1st to answer any questions, concerns about housing and rent. And then we've got the PTA, our annual event. This is our 17th year of the Fun Run, which brings together Brooklyn school communities, and we raise dollars for Title I schools. And that's at the end of October. And that's all that I have today, but I'll take some questions. Go ahead.
I would just say that as a landlord, that I was a little bit surprised and actually a little put off by the Department of Sanitation communication about the newly mandated trash barrels. In theory, they're a wonderful idea because it will simplify and picking up the trash and so forth and so on. But what sort of jolted me was to be receiving at the same time a commercial notice about acquiring these bins.
Mhm.
And it smelled a little bit like inside jobby to
Right.
me. And I think there are a bunch of landlords that are not going to be clicking their heels to go out and pay $54 and plus tax or whatever. The charge was way up there.
That's
I
right.
bought some that were very similar to this without the handle in the back. I recently bought them at a job lot store for $24 a piece. They're 55 gallons
Right.
too. So, I mean, something doesn't
Totally.
really add up.
I don't disagree with you. Yeah, I don't disagree with you. We're garnering feedback because they're administering a very similar policy to our small businesses. And it's concerning that the administration is both unilaterally making the decision and then saying you have to buy our designated bin, while we're witnessing a collapse of the administration in other ways. Thank you so much.
Other questions? Bueller? Okay, thank you,
Thank you.
Councilwoman. Okay, so you're super ahead good right now. So right now we'll jump ahead then. So, usually we try to go into some degree of the political sphere stuff, but also we do try to do the cultural stuff as well here at IND. So I am very pleased to introduce Joseph Jones. He is professionally known as Joe D. Johns. He's a Brooklyn-based artist and journeyman with extensive experience in theater and film. Currently, Joseph is developing a one-man play by which he channels James Baldwin's conscious and message into modern audience, which is on the impact of racism and its ongoing legacy. He's also working with BAM on a presentation on to youth on Baldwin and his enduring legacy. And of course, as we all know, like Baldwin's message is as relevant today as it was 6 years ago. So it really does go into this club's greater message of social justice. So I'd like to introduce Joseph Jones.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to crash this party. Okay, yeah, so I don't need this. Okay. So yes, I do a one-man play honoring the spirit of James Baldwin. If you know James Baldwin, it's his 100th year centenary this year. He would have made 100 if he was alive. And so I embody his consciousness and bring it into modern times. Because, of course, if you read James Baldwin, he was very prolific and very prophetic. And the things that we're facing today, he was animate about expressing. And I don't think he was as popular as he is now because our consciousness had not risen to that place. And it seems as though, and we're still in that place, that we marginalize ourselves with these very basic labels. Like show of hands, who identifies themselves as being white? Anyone in this room? You, all of you. Now, is there anything behind that I should know? Is there a place called Whitelandia that I haven't been to? Is there a culture that I have not quite learned? Is there? This is a question for the white people. It's called what? Polka. Boca. White land is called Boca, right? Oh, was that in Ohio? Where is that? The point is, there are ethnicities behind your whiteness. And it's a shame that you're still hiding behind this marginalized concept of nothing. This may lie the problem. Because as you pretend to be white, then I have to pretend to be black. And I know there's no blacktopia anywhere on this planet. And that's something we must begin to really recognize in ourselves. In order for change to begin, we, and I guess the white people in this room, must look at their counterparts equally and learn from them equally, whether they be Asian or Southeast Asian. And you see this within our, I guess, our candidacy, our president-elect, Kamala. I think she's gonna, I think we all want change, and I think that she's gonna probably pull ahead. And as she does, you know, it's a shame that she has to describe herself as brown and not Indian, because she is. And she's also Jamaican, am I right? Right. And these are two very, very different cultures. Now, Black, to me, is a class, a culture, and a consciousness. And white is simply a mentality. So any one of us can adopt that mentality for exclusivity. But if we want to live in a world where we're all seen for who we are, not for the color of our skin, then we're beginning to evolve. We're intelligent people at this point, I would hope. And this is one of the first things that I think on a base level in your community, in your neighborhood, in your building. I'm here because I live in the same building as Eileen, and we have wonderful, candid conversations all the time. And she invited me out and said, why don't you say a little something to the people in regards to your flight and your journey? And to put it, I have another friend named Shelly, okay? Shelly lived in New York for many, many years. 1987, she lived in Brooklyn. And she would be, quote unquote, a white woman. And I said, Shelly, wow, that was a tough time, 1987, New York City, Brooklyn. Wow, weren't you afraid? Were you afraid? Were you scared? And she said, no, I was looked out for. They protected me. They made sure I was safe because I was different. I'm more afraid, what she said, of now, this time. And I said, why is that? She said, because of the white mentality. Now, this is coming from a woman of ethnicity who's quote unquote white. So I challenge all of you to explore your other ethnicities that got you to this beautiful place of immigrants and migrants. And we exercise and celebrate that equally, because if you look back to grade school, right? And you had a crayon box and you needed to draw white on that page, right? You didn't need anybody, just white was all it took, right? But do you remember how you got to black if you lost that crayon, if that crayon ran out? Did you know how you actually created black again? Does anybody remember that? You forgot the basics. It took every crayon in that box to get back to black. And that's what we should be thinking, inclusion. If anything, I'd rather you be more black than white, because then it would include everybody equally. So I'd much rather be called brother than black, until that has a positive connotation, until you look at me equally, until you can understand and want to understand my walk, my life. Because we have to live in this world together. So your fear would be the main reason we hold back this society. I spoke to another friend of mine in my building, Dawn, an older Chinese woman. And I said, why haven't I really seen the identity from your offspring? Why I can't quite grasp their identity. And she said, what do you mean? I said, you mean the bananas? I said, I just left it alone. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Bananas? So then I came back to her, I said, okay, that thing you were saying about the bananas, you said you called them the ABCs and the bananas. What did you mean by that? She said, they're yellow on the outside and white on the inside. I said, wow, that's pretty harsh. She said, no, they completely abandoned their culture to assimilate. And when that happens, we all are cheated. Whether you're Polish or Russian or Jewish, I want to celebrate that with you. But if you do not express that because you're hiding behind a cloak, then where are we going? Where are we going? How do we evolve? If I can't get to know the real you and you can't really see me beyond the color. That's all I have to say. Yes.
When Trump raised various issues of racial
Sure.
morbidity, so to speak, she responded.
Mm-hmm.
And her response, I thought, was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Her response was, I'm not going to address that.
Mm.
That, in fact, what we need to do is to remove divisiveness from our public discussion and see people, irrespective of their backgrounds or perhaps respecting all their backgrounds.
That's correct.
But in fact, not emphasizing the divisive among them. So I ask you how you consider that approach as obliterating discussion of race and other divisive factors, so as to emphasize the need for the country to move together as a whole in response to the approach that you have just discussed.
Well, definitely, first and foremost, I see myself as an American. I also see myself as a human being. I think the world sees me as Black. I don't think any Black child or anybody in particular knows that element of themselves until the world introduces it to themselves. So I think in regards to what she said, I do believe, yes, on one hand, but I think we should also embrace the differences. I think we don't need to marginalize into a place of just one note. It's okay. I think the differences are what makes us special, especially as New Yorkers, especially as Americans. One of the greatest strengths we have globally is the diversity, because we're able to reach the entire world from this place. So that's how I feel about that. Embrace the differences and embrace your differences as well. Don't hide behind something that you can't quite identify. Okay?
So, as probably everyone here knows, there was this guy, he was in, well, my favorite holiday movie, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. He ran for office a few times. I think he's doing it again. And he was on trial twice in the past year. And unfortunately, because it was of New York laws, this dude was not able, us as Americans and New Yorkers, we could not actually see the ongoings of the trial day to day. And so, because of current New York State law, well, we do have a speaker here who is actually working to try to do that, change that. Let me pin it. Senator Brad Hoylman Siegel, who actually has a bill about that. And reason we've asked him to come speak is because there was actually discussion in the executive board about trying to pass a resolution about that. And we thought, we should try to learn more about the bill and everything. So, Senator? Or Senator. Okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Hey,
Hi,
Senator, how are you?
I'm well. Nice to see everyone, or at least the backs of everyone. I think but anyhow, good to see you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I was just bringing up about your bill about court transparency, allowing audio visual equipment in there.
Yes. Well, how would you like me to proceed? Basically, it's a busy night, as you know. So I'm running around town, but I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this issue. I'm State Senator Brad Hoylman Siegel. I'm chair of the Judiciary Committee. I saw Alyssa and several of you out in Chicago. and really do appreciate your interest in this issue. You know, New York State is one of only 2 states that doesn't allow cameras, whether still or video, in their trial courts. The other one being Louisiana. And we've been trying to change that for a number of years, and have passed legislation in the Senate to do just that. We've gotten support from the public and the press, and court officials, unofficially from the highest ranks of the Office of Court Administration. And we hope that we can actually get it passed in both houses next session. The reason it's so important is that if you've been in Albany, or even if you've, been, watching budget hearings by the Senate or Assembly, there's a lot of mistrust of our judicial system. And I think it's mostly unwarranted, but it's largely due to the fact that the public doesn't know what's going on in the courtroom. And I think you saw it during the Trump trial, that the verdict is questioned by not just Trump and his defense team, but their lies and untruths about how those proceedings went, about their lies and untruths about our district attorney, their lies here in Manhattan, their lies and untruths about the charges ricocheted all across the country. And I think that a lot of that misinformation could have been squelched had we had cameras to actually record what the hell was going on during that trial. Now, the arguments against having cameras in courtrooms date back to the early part of the last century, when New York first banned cameras in courtrooms. It was during the period of yellow journalism, as it was known then, where the sensationalism of the tabloid newspapers like the New York World Herald made it almost, made an outcry reach, every level of government in New York. And so cameras were summarily banned. But since then, we've taken some baby steps. In fact, for a decade, New York did allow cameras after the Assembly and Senate permitted a trial period, which was followed up with a report that basically endorsed cameras being returned to the courts, but the legislature never acted on it. And again, it goes back to this idea that if we have cameras and transparency in our judicial system, then the argument goes lawyers and litigants will take advantage of it and exploit the truth. Well, I mean, my opinion is the truth is what matters here, and the public should get to see it. So we're still a court system that has artists sketching the visage of the defendant, but doesn't allow the recorded voices, doesn't allow transcripts to be distributed to the media or to the public in real time, doesn't allow the rules of evidence to be understood by the public. And I'm hopeful that New York eventually will, in the next session, will join the 48 other states that have cameras, that allow the public to understand, that allow the press to report, and with big cases and trials coming up, including another trial of Harvey Weinstein, I think it's more important than ever that the public get their shot at knowing what goes on in the halls of our judicial system. So I do think this is tied very closely to judicial accountability and to ensuring that judges are acting above board. And I'm hopeful that will change this. So would love, to have a memo or a letter of support from IND at the appropriate time, if you so choose. We're trying to build a coalition, which includes the Fund for Modern Courts, the city and state bar associations, almost every major media organization and editorial board that have advocated for our legislation. Again, we haven't moved it in the assembly, but there's a lot of support in that house too. And hopefully we'll see progress in the coming session. Happy to answer some questions about it. Thanks so much again for the chance to speak to you. I'm sitting here on the High Line in West Chelsea with my colleague, Council Member Eric Botcher, as we're about to head to another event on a busy Thursday night.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Has any consideration been the potential danger to litigants, defendants, lawyers, judges by broadcasting them on live TV? And those are people really who have, particularly the litigants, criminal defendants who have most at stake. Any consideration given to that?
You know, that is obviously a sensitive topic. Our bill is written in such a way that the judge can make a decision depending on the circumstances as to whether to permit video cameras or still cameras or neither. So we'd like to think of it as a case-by-case basis. You know, you wouldn't want cameras and, you know, on sensitive topics, particularly involving young children, and in some cases, criminal defendants. I would say that it works well in every other state that has had cameras. But I understand that it's definitely a concern that judges will have to address in their own courtrooms. But let's leave it to the judges to make the call, as they do on other circumstances involving their courtrooms. But a blanket prohibition really makes New York, the media capital of the world, ironically, the exception in our states across the country. Okay, thanks.
For the right. Okay.
Tell them happy birthday.
Okay. Here you go, Brad. 14th Street stairs or elevator to that.
Hi. I can't hear anything else. I think my sound is.
IND is off the Zoom camera.
Oh, IND's off the Zoom camera. Hello.
Somebody put IND back on the Zoom camera.
Okay. Well, I said my piece. I guess I'll just jump.
Can somebody put the meeting back on Zoom, please?